Hey guys, Cade Wilcox here, host of the Primitive Podcast. Thanks for joining us for today's episode. We have Rodney Madsen on. Rodney is the founder and CEO of GermBlast, a really cool company. Been building it over the last 10 to 15 years. And really fascinating time for them as they, they're scientists. And so this whole time of COVID and serving businesses. So it's really fun to hear about his journey where they identified a problem, years ago, and then create an entire business around solving that problem. I really appreciated some of his insights on leadership. And one of the things I probably enjoyed the most about this episode was Rodney's a really great dad. So he has a 15 and 18-year-old son. And it was fun for me hearing his story and the way he talked about his family. So you're going to enjoy this episode. Thank you for listening to the Primitive Podcast. Share the episode with your friends. Help us grow the podcast. We really appreciate it.
One of the things it's kind of this mantra that I give my boys all the time is do the hard stuff first. Whether it's talking about homework or we're talking about working out for football or whatever, to do the hard stuff first, that by itself will make you unique, right? Because people are trying to get the easy stuff out of the way just to knock something out, right? Well, do the hard stuff first and everything else seems very, very easy.
Rodney, thanks for joining the Primitive Podcast. Really appreciate it. It's been really fun. I think I've met you probably 4 or 5 years ago. And your business was really starting to take off, and our business was really starting to take off. And what you do at GermBlast obviously is a real relevant and pertinent thing. Where we're at in this kind of cultural, societal moment. So it's really fun to have you on the podcast. Really appreciate you joining us, and can't wait to learn from you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure being here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
So why don't we start by just tell people who is Rodney Madsen and what is GermBlast and what do you do, and let's start there.
Yeah, Rodney Madsen. I'm the CEO of GermBlast. I have 2 boys, a wife I've been married to for 24 years. My boys are 15 and 18 years old. Got one about to graduate this year.
What's that feel like?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, people tell you, but you just can't know until you experience it.
Yeah.
I will tell you that the hardest thing is probably what everyone would imagine. It's he won't be at home,
right.
And he won't be there just to have that conversation. But it's fun. It's fun. We've been doing a lot of college trips, and he's been kind of evaluating where he wants to go. So I think he's kind of narrowed it down to a couple, 3, and they're all great places, and I'm looking forward to kind of living that experience with him. Yeah.
The 15-year-old's probably like, I am about to be the only child.
He is, but he's also, over Christmas we had this conversation. It was just the 3 of us actually. We went to Jackie's family's house, and they went out for a walk. So the boys and I were at the house together, and Tyler made mention, that hey, this is kind of our last Christmas as one unit, a family, and which is not necessarily true, but that's how he felt.
Did you start to feel it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's weird not to go down a rabbit hole here, but I have a twin brother, and his son is about to graduate from Lubbock Cooper, and he's not even my son, but we've been around each other since he was born.
Yeah.
And like he, about to hopefully go play college football, and so it's just. And I feel the emotion of it all. And it's weird, and it's like, well, that's a long ways. What if he gets homesick? And then we're all collaborating, like, well, I'll go 1 week, and you go 1 week, and then mom and dad can go 1 week.
Oh,
and it's
man.
like, you're like, I don't know. It's a weird feeling. And he's not even mine. So I told my wife, I'm in huge trouble. When Salek turns 18, I'm like going to be a mess, and I'm like a control freak. So, I'm going to have to figure this out.
Yeah, so I'll spare you all the... You already know kind of how those things are going to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is exciting, but also a bit depressing.
For sure. Yeah. No, I get it. So tell us about GermBlast.
Yeah, GermBlast started. Josh Underwood is a partner of mine in GermBlast. We started a company back in 2006 called Dermacare.
Okay.
And Dermacare was a wound care company. We had a unique technology that we were utilizing to kind of help heal chronic wounds. And through that process, we kept hearing these things when we were in hospitals about healthcare associated, because we were asking, why did all these infections happen? I mean, they were pretty horrible. And so we were hearing this term, healthcare associated infections, or back then they said hospital acquired infections. So we started looking into that, and what we learned was at the time there was about 1.7 million infections like that every year. So you go to a hospital for some procedure and you leave with an infection. And then of those 1.7 million people, 99,000 people would die from those infections.
Good grief.
And so that number, that statistic was pretty steady for as far back as you can look at it, maybe 10 years. And we're thinking, why isn't the problem better, right? Why is it happening? So kind of going down that road, Josh and I literally flew all over the country, and we went to different infection preventionists at hospitals, and they would talk to us. A lot of them, obviously were busy or they couldn't talk to us. But those that we spoke to, we saw some similar issues, some similar problems that kind of reared their ugly heads. We learned also that it really wasn't it's kind of unfair to call them hospital-acquired infections because the inference is the hospital did something wrong. But what we learned was there was a multitude of things, including maybe patient things that actually made that happen. And so we said, okay, well, why isn't there a fix? But at the same time, there was some legislation that was proposed that would incentivize hospitals to do better, right? Really, it would penalize hospitals for doing poorly, right? And that actually, there was hospitals that believed that wouldn't happen, and it wouldn't come to fruition, and there were others that were being proactive. Okay, if this happens, we need to do something about it. Ultimately, it did happen, and so hospitals, for not just this, but many other things, like get, I guess you can call it penalized in their revenue, and that hurts. I mean, hospitals don't make a big profit margin, unlike people
margins.
think. Yeah, very, very small. And so, so we said, okay, what if we came up with some program based on all this knowledge we now have, these studies that we've done, and provide a program that can help them reduce this issue? Because before that, it's not like hospitals were derelict. It's not like that, but it wasn't a focus because infections happen, right? And so they happen for a multitude of reasons. And when they happen, we just address it, we fix it, right? But when that pendulum swung the other direction to, hey, you're going to be penalized, some people, especially rural community hospitals that don't have resources, they were like, what do we do? How do we do this, right? And so we felt like we had enough information to produce this thing. And we did, and I was so sure and so confident based on our research that this is beneficial to hospitals, well, any healthcare facility, but hospital, anywhere you would stay overnight, right? It could be beneficial, right? And so we put this thing together and we launched it, and the first year, nothing. I mean, it was, we put a lot of effort. We built software, and we came up with all this. And so the second year was better, but it was still close to nothing. And we looked at each other, Josh and I, we said, okay, is this going to work? I mean, is this really something the market's ready for? Perhaps we're just crazy, and this is not something that's going to work. But I told him, I said, we need to press forward. If for nothing else, we've got way too much money invested in this and too much time.
I
feel like it's going to work. It's just something that people are going to need. And there was at some point this awakening, that, okay, yeah, we get it. And there were some forward-thinking, innovative hospitals that said, and I'm not talking small, there were some big ones, right here in Lubbock, as a matter of fact, one in particular that took a leap of faith and said, hey, I think that you guys are onto something, let's try it out. And we did it, and there was some significant results, right? So the thing ultimately became GermBlast. Our company is actually called Infection Controls, and so but we're best known by our process name. And so fast forward to today, I can't even tell you how many healthcare facilities we're in, and I mean across Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and we have school districts, about 150 school districts, to include Dallas and Houston and El Paso, just big, but the key for us is being preventative, right? It's not something that you just react to. You should look into, how can I prevent this from happening in the beginning? And the challenges are great. We started this back as Infection Controls back in 2009, and look where we're at today.
Right.
So the story that we've been telling people about being preventive is now very, very applicable.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you found that a lot of what you've developed over the last 20 years, 15 years, as it relates to prevention, is applicable to the current situation we're in with COVID?
Absolutely.
Or is it is? So
well, I mean, think about it. I mean, it kind of depends on what your belief system is. And I, based on research, we do tons of research. But, I mean, think about it. One of the things that we do for our clients is, when you hear GermBlast, a lot of people have this impression, oh, these are glorified janitors, or we we blast germs, right? And to some degree that's true, but there's so many pieces to the program that people don't know or see until you actually hear what it is that we have to offer. And in a lot of ways, GermBlast, while it's a cool name, it actually hurts us because it doesn't give the full gamut of what it is that we provide. But if you think about today's situation, how before we had a vaccine and we don't really even know what the results of that going to be, what were we being told to do in an effort to reduce this transmission, right? Yeah. So we were being told to engage in certain behaviors, right? So, wash your hands, clean your environment, wear a mask. And that's one of the very things that we teach our clients. Based on research, these are the behaviors that you can engage in that will help you reduce the likelihood for infection. But right now, or before we came into the picture, when you think about it from a prevention standpoint, what did people do? Well, if you had a staph outbreak in your locker room, you just threw bleach all over the place, right? But you didn't do anything until there was a problem, right? But what if we said, you don't have to have that kind of a problem? At least when you look at the number, the quantity, the volume, the prevalence of an infection. So maybe staph's not that scary to you because you never had it. But if you have MRSA, which is antibiotic-resistant staph, right? If you have that, it could be scary, right? And people can die. So if I started giving you numbers of what that looks like, I'm not a fear monger, but if it was your child, what would you do? What would you want to do in order to prevent that, likelihood? So there are a lot of things that are happening today that you can circle back and say everything that we do, from gathering data in the environment to providing ways, we call it a public health campaign for our clients on ways they can reduce infection, and then also systematically and routinely disinfecting the environment to keep those levels low, providing education. Those are all applicable to today, right? And if we were doing things that were preventive in nature from the very beginning, we might see less prevalence, which obviously would translate into, less severe injury, less time in the hospital, and less fatality, right? And so we just bring to the table what other people are not necessarily thinking about day to day. It just happens when it's an emergent issue.
So a couple of questions on this for you. First of all, I love when you hear a origin story of a business that was born out of need and necessity. Like you saw a problem and you sought out to fix that problem. And a lot of great businesses, that's how they're birthed. So it's a really cool story about how you and Josh saw a need and you met the need.
That's right.
And it's also really cool to hear about your perseverance and tenacity, because it is really it's easy to quit things after a couple of months of difficulty, much less a couple of years. So props to you on your tenacity, and no doubt has contributed to your success. I don't mean to be too broad or too generalist, but most of us want quick fixes, not behavioral changes.
Yeah.
And what I hear you saying that really makes what you guys do unique is like you're not just killing a germ, although you can do that. You're trying to change behavior and create solutions on the front end to be proactive versus reactive. Do you find that really difficult, dealing kind of with, I don't know if it's American culture or society or the way people think, whatever you want to call it, but does that make your job really difficult?
Oh,
because it's not microwavable. It's a behavioral change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually there's behavioral theory, coming from the public health sector and studying public health, there's this theory called the health belief model, right? And it's basically when you're talking about an event, COVID is a good example, before it spread like it did, right? What people were thinking, and here in the United States, when it was in Wuhan, was how susceptible is our country to that really, right? Or if I were to get it, is it going to be bad? Because you think about it, if you think about a third world country getting an outbreak like that versus the United States, people in the U.S. say, well, if I do get sick, I have a healthcare system that can support me. And that affects the way that we behave, right? And so like washing hands, right? We talking about that a minute ago. If I do get sick, then somebody can fix me, so I'm not so worried about washing my hands. But the opposite of that is if I were in Africa, in an area where I have a huge Ebola outbreak and I have an opportunity to wash my hands or bleach my hands, I'm going to do it because I know that it's life or death, right? And so when we're out promoting what it is that we, especially in the early days, we're out there really selling something that people didn't really know they needed. It made sense in concept, right? But they've never done it before. So if I said, so I come to this with this idea, this thing that I think that they need based on the research that we did, and they look and they say, sounds like a good idea. Where does that go on the budget, right? Where do I take away from to put this in? What can I replace it with, right? And there wasn't anything because it's not something that they've ever done or considered. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, it's what we fight with every day, right? It's the reason why people don't wash their hands. I mean, why wouldn't you wash your hands? Why would you walk into a restaurant and walk straight out? I mean, it only takes you 20 seconds, right? So why wouldn't you simply wash your hands?
Yeah.
It's the health belief model, right? And so I promise you, if you were certain that there was going to be a negative consequence for not washing your hands, you would do it, right? But we have this thing inside of us that says, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating psychological thing. You know, again, now I'm going down a rabbit hole, but I guess it's my podcast. I can do what I want. But it's like this idea of like, okay, to prevent heart disease, I'm not a doctor. Okay, everyone, I'm not a doctor. Okay, but to prevent heart disease, you know, walk 4 or 5 times a week, eat real food, get good sleep, you know, or just pop a pill, and live however the heck you want. Yeah. And it's just like behavioral change is really difficult. And anyway, it's complex. And you go back to COVID, and then you have all the information flying at you. You have the characteristics of an independent, spirit, and having your own opinions. You have all the things you're talking about. What a gigantic mess!
It is.
It's a big mess.
And there's the information that's coming at people is just fraught with bias.
Right.
And we hear one day from an organization, wear a mask, and another organization says don't wear a mask, and so there's so much. There's not really a consensus on things. Everyone has an opinion, and they can all say it's based on. We can all look at the same evidence, by the way, and come up with. We can argue 2 different opinions based on the same evidence, and it's just really confusing for people. And so, what we try to do is kind of eliminate some of that confusion, so we can make a decision a little bit easier to make.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've seen a lot of like all of a sudden companies just like pop up trying to take advantage of the moment. It's like they have this new application and they're just going to come in and spray it on everything. Maybe some of that works, but the what really is fascinating about your model is that it's really much more in depth than that. It's based on research. It's based on analysis. It's based on behavioral change, not just kind of a microwavable approach of just spraying a bunch of stuff down.
Right.
So it's pretty fascinating what you've done. So, your real background and skill set sounds, heavy research, science, analysis, in all the things that means. So I was asking you this question a little bit before we started recording, but how do you balance, your bent and your skills with research and analysis and science and all that with leading an organization and building a company? Because they're really kind of different things. So how have you tried to balance that as your company's grown and you wear this role of both leader and CEO, but clearly someone who knows the science, who does the research, and I assume enjoys it, or else you wouldn't be doing it.
Right, exactly.
So how do you balance that?
I can tell you this, being a researcher or being the lead researcher, it doesn't make you necessarily the best leader, right? And so you can be one and not the other. It doesn't mean just because I have this idea, it doesn't mean I should be the one leading the team, right? And so, but being a researcher as well, I also research leadership. And in a lot of ways, throughout my life, and I've had some people who have modeled this for me, or maybe modeled the way not to do it, it just so happens that I'm lucky enough to be that guy that can be both. I'm not saying that I can do it. There's probably a limit to what it is I can or can't do, and there is a limit. But I have been able to so far. So a long time ago when I started my first company, and we started looking at some legal issues, a lot of people go online and do a legal document online, right? Well, I realized I'm not a legal guy, and I'm not an accountant, and finance things are not my cup of tea. So I have to bring people on board who can do that for me, whether they were my team or whether it was somebody that I outsourced that to. I'm not going to try to be a lawyer, nor am I going to try to be an accountant. And so what I have done, and you kind of have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to do this in a measured way, because you can't just go out there and hire everybody that you think you may need 5 years from now. But I do look at it in the future tense. So when I know where we're going, and I operate from the perspective that we're going to get there, right? So if I know we're going to get there, I'll take a little bit more risk in hiring people in advance so that we can accomplish the goal and we can satisfy the need at the time instead of getting to that moment and say, oh my goodness, we need a chief science officer. What are we going to do, right? And so early on, I started bringing those type of people on, and so it's provided me the ability to create a research team, even though I'm a researcher, so that I have people helping me in that regard. And likewise, bringing on other leaders who are awesome at leading so that they can help me with that. I don't have to be the absolute expert. We bring people on who are great at something and allow them to be great. And so it's not me, it's the team. Just like you with your business here. You have a lot of great people, a lot of amazing thought thinkers here and creative people. And without them, you couldn't do it. It's the same thing. And it's not luck. It's not. I mean, you got to be purposeful about, what your deficits are and fill those deficits with great people and just let them do their thing.
Yeah, that's really good. When you think about your role as leader and CEO, what kinds of things do you really focus on in terms of contributing your strength? So absolutely 100% agree with you. Building a team is the single greatest thing a leader can do because they're more talented and better and more effective at certain things than you are. So aside from that, like, what are the 2 or 3 things that are really critical in your mind for your leadership role specifically? Vision, or is it the details in the organization? Like, what are your focuses as a leader?
You mentioned so many things right there that kind of really encompass what it is that I do. First of all, not a new concept and not unique to it's not something that we discovered on our own. There are people locally. There's a great company. I know you know these folks at ROI Talent. But I was thinking prior to having met them through somebody in our company that to create an environment in your company, a culture in your company that allows people to flourish, don't ask somebody to do something that they're not good at. Right, and that's what a lot of companies do. When you're evaluating an employee, you say these are your deficits, and this is what you need to do better, and accountability. Right. Well, the word accountability, and which by the way this year is our term, is self accountability, not accountability. But accountability is just a way for leaders to shift blame. Right. You didn't do X, great. But if you are having them do a job that meets their strengths, they're going to be awesome and they're going to love what they do. And there's nothing that you can do or say to them that will make them better than they can make themselves. Right. And that's what we allow to happen in our company. Likewise, I'm the same way. So I am, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And the 8 of my top 10 strengths in the Gallup are all strategic, right? And so I'm not the guy that's out there the face of GermBlast. I just am not that guy. I do well in presenting, but when I do it, I'm spent. Right, I am spent. So I would do that. So we have lots of clients that I need to go visit, and our sales team, the clinical stuff is me, and so I'll go do that. But when I'm done, I'll present to 100 people. But when I'm done, I need to just chill out. Yeah. And so I recognize that about me, and I try not to do that a lot because when I do things I'm not great at, it takes away from my ability to do things I'm really good at. And so if you look at it like a Scrum board, right, where you have all of these tasks that a company is supposed to do, and more specifically that GermBlast is supposed to do, instead of saying, here's your job description, do these 10 things, we say, who is best suited based on their strengths to do this thing, right? And that they would love it. And so I believe, and of course this is my own biased opinion, but I believe people tell you that they love what they do. And when they wake up in the morning, if you have to go to work, they say, at least I get to go work at GermBlast, because we've identified, and we're not expert at this. It's an evolving thing, right? But they say, I feel like I'm getting out of work what I'd expect to get out of work, right? And so that has worked very, very well for us. Yeah. But it's not easy to get there because it's a whole different way to think. Right. And I think there's a trend moving that direction. But if
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leann and Joy are amazing. And really if you're listening to this podcast and you're a leader, you really should explore and contextualize it for your own business. But really, you really should explore strengths-based leadership and let Leann and Joy help you get there. We were so committed to it. Now we have Annie, who's our chief of staff, and it's what she does. And I always say she was our best business decision we ever made. Anyway, it really is. It's worth it, and it's exciting to hear. I didn't know y'all had done that.
Yeah.
I didn't know you had worked with them.
Yeah, we even
that.
have somebody who now is certified.
That's awesome.
Right? Yeah,
it's really cool.
And so Amanda Bullen, she's certified now, and she's doing that with all of our team, everybody on every level. And Leann and Joy, you want to see how much you don't know as a leader in your company. Talk to them one time.
Right. That's right. They're so gifted.
They really are.
Man, it's so exciting. I did not know y'all were doing that. And frankly, there are not a lot of companies I interact with that are doing it. I mean, there are a lot of companies who say culture is important. There's a lot of companies who really do seek the well-being of their people. So it's not like there's a lot of bad companies at it. I have not met very many companies, though, that are really intentional about it, that they have someone on their team like you do and like we do who say, no, this is so critical to our people and their good and their well-being, and therefore the ultimate success of the company, that they would allocate resources and energy to setting it up like
Absolutely.
You have. So
I would say to you, it's a detriment to you if you don't look at that.
I agree.
You will never recognize your full potential. By the way, I'm not saying that we have, and I'm not saying we will.
Right.
But I do know, just based on our experiences so far,
you're reaping the benefits.
Oh,
of it.
Absolutely.
100%.
It's certainly prepared us for 300% growth last year. You know what I mean?
Has it? Have you found that it's changed your entire approach to just the practical way that you hire, like even your process of hiring?
It's so funny because I brought this up with Leann and Joy when we first. I said I would love to say these are the things that we need. These are our deficits, and then based on that, what strengths do we need in somebody in order to hire for that position? I think logically you can do that. But you can't. You can't do it that way, right? And so, at least that's what they say in theory. I'm not certain that you can't. But that being said, I think it's because even I don't think you fully recognize somebody's potential, nor do they recognize their own potential for your specific business until they're in there working. So what we've done is we've said, when we find somebody amazing, when we find somebody who you just know they exude excellence, right? You bring them on and you figure it out later, right? I know that sounds crazy because, I got these deficits. I don't know if that person's going to fit, so I might be hiring somebody for nothing, right? But that's not true, because if you think about a standard organization, right, and you bring in these folks, how efficacious are they being doing something that they really don't like or love, right? But somebody who's excellent, you can't train that. You can't.
Right.
You can't. When you find that characteristic, you need to bring it on board. I've done it so many times. I've told people. In fact, you know who you are. I just talked to a lady recently, and I said, "We're talking because I know you're excellent. What am I going to do? I don't know. I don't know what you're going to do. We're going to find that out together. But I know you're excellent, and I want you here, right?" And so we do that a lot, and that's you have been up to our corporate office, but go there now because everybody has that similarity about them in our organization.
A lot of people listening to this are going to go, well, "That's a huge risk, not to know what their role is going to be, and not going to be, what is their work going to be." But I think it's a greater risk to hire someone that's not fit for the role that you think's for the role. And then they get there and it's not life-giving. Their strengths do not align well with what the role was intended to do. And so I love what you're saying. And if it were up to me, we'd hire 100 people a month, whether we had the money or not. Yeah. Because great people make great things happen. And so, man, this is super exciting. I've just not met a lot of people who have really taken it serious in terms of implementation. Yeah. And so it's really cool to hear you really experiencing the same fruits we are. Trying, like you said, striving to do this. It's not ever going to be perfect, but it has been the single greatest impact on our success by a large margin. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that to be true of any organization if you really see it that way.
Yeah, and you said it best. It feels and it seems like a huge risk. It seems like a big investment up front. It seems like, you're chasing, a dream, that may or may not ever happen. But like you said, I think that it's a greater risk not doing it.
I agree.
And that's hindsight.
Right.
You know what I mean? I probably pushed back on it for years, and finally, once you make that leap, you realize this is the only way to go.
Yeah, it's really great. How do you view failure? When you think back on your 10 to 15 years of business and, you think of things that worked, you think of things that haven't, like, how do you approach failure personally as a leader?
Yeah. This is going to sound odd coming from somebody who's a science-based person, but I'm a huge believer in mindset. And so I can, early on when I first became an entrepreneur, and looking at a scale, I think, man, what I worried about back then, I wish I had those problems today.
Yeah.
But I remember, I've got, an MBA, and so, all MBAs, we think we know it all, and coming out of school. And so I started this business, and I thought I was well prepared, and and things were going great. We could sell anything and everything, but there's this magic thing called cash flow, and so we got in a tight spot. We were a medical equipment company. We relied heavily on Medicare, and and everyone who's hearing this, when I say Medicare, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And I didn't prepare for that. I didn't know about that. It wasn't really I didn't have that knowledge when I came into it, and so there was a couple of months where I'd find myself, what have I done? I put my family's life on the line, and the people who are working with me, their livelihood is on the line, and I'm in the closet at 2 a.m., praying because I don't want my wife to know how stressed out I am, and depression, and I mean major depression. But that all came to an end. I mean, things finally worked out, and I have a good friend who was telling me this for a long time, especially back at that time, is, all the problems we have, they're just temporary. And most businesses fail because of a temporary problem. I credit that, by the way, to Jerry Vance, just anybody wants to know. But anyway, it's a temporary problem. I didn't feel that at the beginning, but I will tell you, having come through on the other side of that and experiencing that stress and that depression and just the business experience by itself, I think looking back on that failure during that time, is what I felt like as a failure. Mm-hmm. It changes you. It makes you better. Not in a callous way, but right. but I've been there. I've felt it, and not only can I endure it again, but I can help others as well, and help them understand about this problem being temporary. And that's not just a business. That's a life lesson, right? Most problems are temporary.
Absolutely.
And so, so I look at failure and I say, what an opportunity, right? Now, I'm not saying that I don't get angry or I don't get upset or it doesn't bother me, I don't stress about it. Sure, I do those things. But I think my perspective or the lens that I look through now when I see failure is way different now than it was back then. And as an entrepreneur, it has to be that way. And I feel like probably that's the reason why we see a lot of businesses that don't make it through those statistics, right? Like 5 years, 10 years. You hear that all the time.
Right.
And I really feel like it's the reason why, believe me, I was there and I was seeking help from everybody, wisdom and knowledge and, how can I fix this? And then it was just a moment that God used in my life to really make things happen.
I've never thought of, all problems are temporary problems. It seems like when you talk about mindset, it seems like that would really put things into perspective. Mm-hmm. That instead of kind of freaking out at the chaos, you go, okay, this is chaotic, this is difficult. Calling it what it is, mm-hmm. but having a perspective that it will pass. Yeah. So we got to embrace it. We have to learn from it. We have to adjust where we need to. But this isn't a forever thing. Right.
I occasionally I'll teach a class at Wayland on leadership. And one of the topics that I teach on is the inverse law of sanity. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay, yeah. So basically, leadership is easy when things are good, right? When you're growing like crazy and everybody's loving your company, things are good. When things get tough, right? The inverse law of sanity says that people who have been immersed in chaos, that have been through troubling times, that even are borderline psychopaths even, right? They are the better leaders. And if you think of that, you could probably come up with a half a dozen people that you've known from history that are just like that. Patton and Churchill, mm-hmm. Lincoln, Martin Luther even. So I would say to you, in order to be the best leader you can, you got to experience that kind of stuff. so that in the hard times, you are seemingly calm, right? When things are tough and people are going crazy, the people that you're leading, they're seeking, your confidence. You can be that because you're not freaking out. And sometimes it means experiencing it first so you can see what it looks like.
It's really good. I had never heard that phrase, but even those leaders you just mentioned, I mean, it's unequivocally true. It's not that all people who have served in the military are great leaders, but a lot of them are. And it seems to align with kind of that idea that they you think of Jocko Willenick, for example, or Tim Kennedy, Green Beret, like they're high functioning leaders, and they've been tested in ways that us normal folks will never be tested.
Run to the bullets.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
It's crazy.
That's really good. I'm glad you shared that. How do you view your approach to your own personal growth? As a leader, you're constantly thinking about your people, you're thinking about their growth, you're thinking about the organization's growth, you're solving problems for clients, all things that are natural to being the leader. But how do you personally, kind of put that aside and focus on, Rodney? How do you approach your own personal growth?
Well, I mentioned to you that I'm getting my doctorate, right? I keep saying that. So it seems to me like, that's I don't know if I'll ever finish, it's just one of those things that keeps on going. But you have to invest in yourself. And so the busyness, that can stand in the way and be an obstacle for you to do that. It's so easy to say, I got too much to do today to do X, right? And so you have to invest, and that could be listening to podcasts, that could be reading a book, or watching something on YouTube. I try to do all of that. I try to I'll hear something during the day that I'm just not that knowledgeable about, and I'll say I need to know more about that, and I'm just crazy like that. But in terms of leadership, we mentioned it earlier. I am a scientist who is also a leader. So it's so easy to just kind of default back to the science side of things, but I have to invest in myself so that I can be the leader that the people around me need me to be. And so there's a lot of surrounding yourself with mentors or people who can provide you with a perspective that you didn't have on your own. I do that. I do all of that. Having coffee once a week with somebody and sharing thoughts and ideas, and those are things you just have to do. Now, sometimes that may mean waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get it done.
Right.
But you have to do it.
Yeah,
and
so that's good. So what's your go-to kind of learning source? You mentioned podcasts, you mentioned YouTube. Like, do you have a preference? Do you like reading? Do you like audiobooks? Are you a podcast guy? I mean, practically speaking, what are some of the things you enjoy?
Well, I do have coffee every week with folks, and I get information from them. They get information from me. I love doing that face-to-face. In addition to that, I do listen to podcasts. My podcasts typically are, occasionally I'll listen to something that's leadership, or, I like Simon Sinek and Seth Godin and, Jocko. I like all those things, and I listen. But the ones that really jazz me up are the science ones.
Yeah.
I listen. My favorite is there's two. There's J-Dog MD, Dr. Damania. He's awesome. And then This Podcast Can Kill You.
Okay.
And it's just a couple ladies that they go deep into different diseases. Wow. I know it's crazy. I'm
great.
geeky like that, but
I'm laughing because I have to admit that those are not in my queue. I probably not going to be listening to.
And it's really obscure information that nobody would probably care to hear, but it's I think they're pretty.
That's
cool.
really cool.
So, yeah.
That's really cool. My last question for you, and it's often my favorite, is if you could speak to your younger self, if you could go back 15, 20 years ago, and knowing what you know now, speak to your younger self, what advice would you give him?
Well, I think I already do that. To be honest with you, I do that daily because I've got 2 boys, and I'm trying to provide for them the learning lessons that I've had growing up. So I want them to have more and do more and know more before they get certain age. Now, whether or not they can decipher that information well, it's different. But we have these conversations all the time, and one of the things I think that that resonates, that kind of just a topic that keeps coming up for me to them, is that think of yourself as your own manager, right? Because I always tell my boys, you control your thoughts. You control, the things that you do day to day. I mean, only you can make yourself feel bad, right? And so how do you talk to yourself, right? So you're your own manager. And so ask yourself, if your manager talked to you this way, you know, he would probably be fired, right? I mean, that's not leadership, right? If you spend all of your time doing nothing, right? What would you say to an employee who did that, right? Or if you were that employee, what would you say to yourself? And so the thing for me that I didn't have, and I'm still learning, by the way, I mean, I'm scratching the surface, is this awareness, right? You know, looking at yourself and saying, you know, how can I be a better me? You know, and are the things that I've done today, is this situation that I'm in, is this beneficial, or did I do something noteworthy, positive? Just thinking from that perspective, as opposed to letting life happen to you.
It's really good. Do they listen?
Sometimes. You know, it's funny because, you know, in the moment, I would probably say no, but then I see glimpses of it. In fact, I remember one of the things it's kind of this mantra that I give my boys all the time is do the hard stuff first, right? Whether it's talking about homework or we're talking about working out for football or whatever, to do the hard stuff first, that by itself will make you unique, right? Because it's seemingly, you know, people are trying to get the easy stuff out of the way just to knock something out, right? Well, do the hard stuff first, and everything else seems very, very easy. And one day I heard my younger son, say that, do the hard stuff first. And in addition to that, it was so awesome. My oldest son, I didn't know this about him. This is something he's been doing for a long time. I had no idea. He didn't tell me. And I don't know that he would have told me, except that it accidentally came up one day. That in his phone, he has a note that he keeps, and he has this running list of things that he thinks are wise that he heard from somebody or that he read.
Wow.
And so whether it was from his papa or whether it was from me or, you know, and he'll say so he'll quote it and then he'll put next to it who said it. And then he was telling me this because one of his friends wanted to go to coffee with him one day, and he had all of these issues and things. And so he went to his notes and started telling his friend these things, right? And I thought that was awesome that he was astute enough to say, I need to make note of that, actually make a note of that. And I think that's awesome. And so I see things working, but I may not see it in the moment. Yeah. It's an investment.
It is. And for me, it's one of the harder parts about parenting. It's like, you know, not seeing the fruits of your life. I mean, you see the fruits of your labor. I mean, when they're respectful and, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can know whether or not you got good kids or not. It's pretty clear. But I think for these, you said something earlier that on a parenting level I really resonate with, and that's really wanting more for them. And I find that really being true of my teammates too.
Yeah.
Like I just want more for them. I want them to experience whatever it is for them. I want them to experience more of that. And I want that for my kids so bad. It's ironic we're talking about this because yesterday I was on the road for like 8 hours and so I'm on the phone, you know, the whole time to make it go by fast. And I had this like really great 45-minute conversation with my mom, like, you know, just, you know, remembering back all these, you know, great memories and some challenging memories from growing up. And it just like, it made me think about my own children's experience and how badly I want them to know self-discipline and how badly I want them to know what you just said, do the hard thing first.
Yeah.
And I want them to know, you know, the benefits of them working hard and learning how to work. Like it took me forever to learn how to work, right? And I don't want that for them. But you can't want something more for someone than they want it for themselves.
That's true.
And so making these, like, what I appreciate something you were saying is just make these little daily deposits, right? Just consistently invest in them. You know, you probably didn't think when your 18-year-old was 6, you know, that you'd find out when he was 18, he was absorbing wisdom from you and others. And what a proud moment, you know?
Exactly.
But all you can do is make these like daily deposits.
Yeah.
You just one step, you know, one step in front of the other every day, investing in them, loving in them, you know, speaking into them, and then, you know, trusting God's providence, you know, that in the end, it's all going to shake out.
Exactly. You know, that's leadership, to be honest with you. I mean, you could sum it all up in a leader wants more for their people. You stretch them, you make them feel uncomfortable, all so that they can be better. Yeah. And so I take solace in the fact that if my children don't learn all of my from all of my mistakes in life, the failures will make them better because they made me better.
Yeah.
So as a parent, you can't not want them to fail, right? It's just you want to minimize the risk, right?
Right.
Sometimes it means falling flat on your face,
Yeah.
and just know you said trusting in God's providence, and so that happens.
Yeah.
And then all you can trust is it'll be good.
Yeah.
Something good will come from that, right?
Yeah.
And just be there and be present, be aware.
Yeah.
And
you're a great dad. So if I run into any troubles, I'm just sending my 2 over to your house for a month. Okay, Rodney Madsen.
shoot, I have my own faults. Trust me.
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
I'm sure
We
my
all
kids
do.
can list them for you.
Man, thanks for your time. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for sharing all that. It's really
appreciate
good.
this.
It's fun to learn from someone, and so thanks for sharing all your insight.
I appreciate you inviting me. Thank you very much.